Hello and welcome. You're watching India Today's coverage on Budget Day. We're dissecting the fine print of the Union Budget, trying to make sense of how this impacts your life and the impact this can have on India's growth story. Let me take you through the headlines. I'm practicing. Big relief for middle and salaried class in the budget. No income tax, still an annual income of 12 lakh rupees under the new tax regime. A nil tax slab increase from 7 to 12 lakh rupees. PM hails Janta Janardhan budget, says tax relief will extend to all income groups. Prime Minister says other governments looted citizens. His government is putting money in their pockets.
बजट का फोकस इस बात पर रहता है कि सरकार का खजाना कैसे भरेगा, लेकिन ये बजट उससे बिल्कुल उल्टा है.
Big focus on pole-bound Bihar in the union budget. Capacity expansion of Patna Airport, no greenfield airports to come up. A Makhana board to be set up for farmers too. Modi government waives off custom duty on 36 life-saving drugs. 200 cancer daycare centers to be set up in district hospitals. Electric vehicle and mobile batteries set to get cheaper. Opposition unimpressed by Modinomics. Congress says the government is bankrupt of ideas. PMK alleges it's a Bihar budget with southern states being ignored. The Prime Minister saw Ma Lakshmi's blessings for the middle class yesterday. Today, the goddess of wealth was shining on the taxpayers. There's been substantial relief for the tax-paying Aam Aadmi in the budget. The Prime Minister's government announced that individuals earning up to 12 lakh rupees annually will now be exempt from income tax, a notable increase from the earlier threshold of 7 lakh rupees. The question, of course, is the extent to which this will stimulate domestic demand amidst the global economic uncertainties.
मैं मां लक्ष्मी से प्रार्थना करता हूं कि देश के हर गरीब एवं मध्यम वर्ग समुदाय पर मां लक्ष्मी की विशेष कृपा रहे.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi hoping for Ma Lakshmi's blessing for India's middle class and poor ahead of the budget. And on Saturday, the goddess of wealth seems to have showered her grace on the middle and salaried class. The middle class, which often complains of tax burden, had a major respite coming its way when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced no income tax on income up to 12 lakh rupees per annum, up from 7 lakh rupees per year.
I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees.
The built-in rebate of 60,000 rupees under Section 87A and relief in tax slabs makes incomes up to 12.75 lakh tax-free if you are a salaried individual.
In the new tax regime, I propose to revise tax rate structures as follows: 0 to 4 lakh rupees nil, 4.8 lakh rupees to 4 to 8 lakh rupees 5%, 8 to 12 lakh rupees 10%, 12 to 16 lakh rupees 15%, 16 to 20 lakh rupees 20%, 20 to 24 lakh rupees 25%, and above 24 lakh rupees 30%.
Prime Minister Modi hailed it as a budget which will put extra money in pockets across all income groups.
अब इस बजट में 12 लाख रुपए तक की आय को टैक्स से मुक्त कर दिया गया है. सभी आय वर्ग के लोगों के लिए टैक्स में भी कमी की गई है. इसका बहुत बड़ा फायदा हमारे मिडिल क्लास को, नौकरी पेशे करने वाले जिनकी आय बंधी हुई है, ऐसे लोगों को, मिडिल क्लास को इससे बहुत बड़ा लाभ होने वाला है।
Those earning 12 lakh rupees and above will get 80,000 rupees tax benefit. Those earning 18 lakh rupees and above will get 70,000 rupees tax benefit. While those in the slab of 25 lakh rupees income and above will get a tax benefit of 1,10,000 rupees.
पहली बार इतना उत्साहित तरीके से लोग स्वागत किया है बजट को। मैं प्रधानमंत्री जी को आभार प्रकट करता हूं और निर्मला सीतारमण जी को भी मैं धन्यवाद देता हूं। बहुत खूबसूरत बजट दिया है और चाहे किसान हो, मिडिल क्लास हो, गरीब हो, चाहे बिजनेस कम्युनिटी, एमएसएमई में जितने लोग लगे हुए हैं और दूर दराज के जितने भी लोग हैं, सबके लिए इतना शानदार बजट दिया है।
In a way, the Honorable Finance Minister has met the demand of large section of middle class, particularly as more and more poor are coming into the middle class with rising incomes. The last report was 25 crore poor have now come into the middle class, have been relieved from multidimensional poverty. I think it's a great relief.
All eyes will now be on the new income tax bill that the government is bringing soon. Bureau Report, India Today.
I want to go across now to senior Congress leader Praveen Chakravarti, chairperson of the Professionals Congress and Data Analytics of the Indian National Congress, now joining us. Naina Lal Kidwai joins us as well. I want to go across to Praveen Chakravarti first. You know, a lot in the opposition, many in the opposition were saying the government must spur demand, must boost consumption, must give more money to the Aam Aadmi. The government has gone out and done that, and now naturally the middle class is cheering. This was the one constituency which seemed a bit miffed with not really being treated with TLC, with love and care. Do you think the government's been able to address that issue, which is kind of building up, and they've now gone and bitten the bullet and left more money in the wallets of the taxpayers?
Yes. See, to the extent that, I think the term middle class is somewhat overused and abused, but to the extent that people in that income range will have to now not pay taxes or pay lower taxes, it is welcome. But I think, Rahul, what we really want to do is to take a step back. And like I said, that is welcome. But if the larger economic intent behind it was to stimulate demand, consumption demand, because the private sector has refused to invest in the last decade, regardless of how much the government has pleaded with it. So then the last resort was to try and stimulate demand. Now, to that extent, while this is welcome, I would have liked to see a bolder statement from the finance minister saying GST, indirect taxes, that is regressive, that would immediately stimulate consumption demand. And while I understand that GST rates will be set up by the decided by the GST Council, a signal from the Union Finance Minister in the budget saying we are committed to lowering GST rates across. And
no, but that's an unfair expectation. Imagine if she'd done it, the likes of Praveen Chakravarti, Mr. Chidambaram and the others would have been critiquing her, saying that there's a GST council for this, all the finance ministers from the different states sit with the union finance minister. That's where this discussion should have happened. This is an authoritarian government. They've unilaterally gone and announced their intent. This is not the right thing to do. You would have been criticizing exactly what you're now advocating.
No. That's not at all true. I mean, it is no secret that the union government has the veto and has 2/3, and it has most of the state governments in the council. So I'm not saying, that's why I said, I think the signal, I use the word signal is important. But I think, Rahul, we have to take a step back. What was the context when we entered this budget? I mean, the context was global economic headwinds. The economic seas were choppy. There were holes in our economic boat. What was needed was for us to move to a new boat. Instead, what we got was trying to tinker with the existing boat. And the chief economic advisor in his economic survey actually had a proposal for a new boat. And that proposal was get out of the way and trust businesses and people.
No, but both of those have been key tenets of this budget. A new committee being set up to try and reduce regulation, the new direct tax code having 50% of the current regulations and tax burden. therefore the government through talk and through action signaling that it does intend to try and make it easier to do business and just to increase the ease of living?
Absolutely not. When, in fact, they've done to the contrary. When the chief economic advisor said, get out of the way. So let's take exports. I'm glad that the government has recognized exports as an important driver of economic growth. But what did it need? It needed a radical reverse cutting of import duties across the board. It needed the finance minister to signal to the export fraternity that you will have flexible exchange rates, we will get into bilateral, multilateral agreements. Instead, what we got was basic customs duty cut for wet blue leather and some fish products. I mean, that is called tinkering. That's not a new board. And this is exactly what the chief economic advisor meant by get out of the way. And instead, the government and the finance minister is now more in the way. No,
but I don't agree, because the moment you say, okay, we'll sign multilateral and bilateral trade agreements and take that pressure and put that onus on yourself, you're negotiating you're compromising your negotiating capabilities. You'd much rather go out and say, okay, we may want a deal, we may not want a deal. It depends on what the other side puts on the table. You want to push back. The moment you commit in Parliament, we'll be doing X, Y, Z, bilateral or multilateral deals this year, and that's our key focus. You're really pushing yourself into a corner in those trade negotiations, Mr. Chakravarti.
Rahul, no, I think you're pushing yourself into a corner here because, on one hand, we have very clearly said the budget is a statement of intent. It's a statement of signal. And the idea was to tell businesses, to give them confidence, to tell them, go ahead, inspire trust and confidence. I'm only using the chief economic advisor's own words. And that was what was needed. Like I said, we saw very, very, very little in terms of getting us onto a new boat. So instead of getting out of the way, the government is more in the way. I mean, we saw that in the entire budget speech, tinkering with rates and tinkering with customs duties and changing definitions of MSMEs. The boat has a hole. Get a new boat. Don't try and repair this boat or tinker this boat.
It's a bit ironic that you're saying it because you're from the Congress party and your government has made more budgets. Your party has made more budgets than this party has. And that is what we saw.
There you go. Go back to what happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We're in 2025. We're looking ahead. We're looking forward.
What impact do you expect? If you can just leave your political hat aside for a moment, put on a data crunching hat. Now that more money is being left in the hands of the taxpayer, Praveen, what impact do you expect this will have on consumption? Because you say that private Inc. is not investing, India Inc. is not investing because they weren't seeing visibility on the horizon of consumption demand going up. Now that that's likely to happen, how do you see that potentially spur investment by India Inc. in the quarters to come?
I looked at the income tax statistics for assessment year 2023-24. As per my analysis, there'll be about 1.5 million beneficiaries of this enhanced increased tax exemption threshold. And to that extent, and to the extent that these 1.5 million people will go out and spend that money, I think it can be a positive. Will it definitely be, will it provide that boost that will take private investment from about 19% of GDP into the mid-20s? I'm not so sure. I think this has to be complemented with the radical rationalization of GST rates. For example, Rahul, there is simply no need for anybody to pay 48% GST on a car. It doesn't matter who brought in this proposal or who brought in those rates, whether it was 20 years old or 10 years old, doesn't matter. We have to go forward. 48%. I mean, I'm using that as an example. So this has to be complemented with a rationalization and a reduction of GST rates, which, by the way, is a regressive indirect tax, which will immediately trigger consumption demand. And that is sure to trigger demand and private investment.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Praveen Chakravarti from the Data Analytics Cell of the Congress Party for joining us with your critique. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to go across to Naina Lal Kidwai. She's been a top banker, and it will be very interesting to see her insights on the impact you think this extra money that's been left in the wallet of the taxpayer is likely to have, because the taxpayer can choose to save it, invest it, spend it, which is the most efficient when it comes to spurring economic growth, and what do you see most likely to happen, and how is this likely to play out in your assessment?
Rahul, it's significant in that there's 1 lakh crore of money which the government is enabling and putting in the hands of the middle class. And to the extent that this money is spent for consumption and creating demand, it helps spiral growth. And I would hope more, therefore, that it's spent on consumption than on saving at this stage, because we need to have that flow through of demand, which then is very good for industry, which has been asking for this, which hopefully also then leads to the private capex and investment, which there has been a long-standing demand by the government. Why is the private sector not coming back in? Now, for this money to actually be there for the demand-led acceleration as we wanted, and let me say that the levels and rates that they've come in have been substantial. This is not tinkering at the margin, it's substantial. There will be other things like, inflation being checked. I was just hearing the discussion on GST, which could be seen as inflationary in that it eats into that individual budget. Interest rate and interest rate cuts, because 30% of all bank loans are now personal loans. So all the aspects that go into the spending basket of the middle class must also deliver, so that the money that is being saved through tax actually goes in to a spending where there's a feel-good feeling and people actually have the money to set forth there.
Shankaraya, how much of a lag is there typically between this announcement and the taxpayer then deciding whether he wants to consume, whether he wants to invest, whether he wants to save, and then potentially India Inc. looking at those consumption numbers and saying, okay, this means our capacity utilization is going up further, and now we should use some of the cash lying on our balance sheets to go out and invest?
So, well, the milestones would be first the passage of the finance bill, and the second milestone would be individuals assessing what their tax outgo would be and how much cash they have got balance in their accounts. So I think this will go on into the next festival season. You might see the first kick up in the consumption. I mean, there will be some preemptive purchases. I mean, people would get excited that, so those who have surplus will typically know that their surplus will be higher, so they might have a new holiday or purchase a new device or something. But on the overall picture, I think you will have to wait for at least a minimum of 6 months to sort of get a sense of where this is going. And remember, all of this also is having the income assurance. So people get a chill factor when tax rates are cut. They feel that there was something uncertain is supposed to, the familiar becomes uncertain. And so they will wait out to see whether everything is fine, and then they might probably work towards the spending. I think 6 months should be a good milestone.
I want to go across now to Anand Goenka, Vice Chairperson at RPG Group. They're into tires, IT, infrastructure, pharmaceuticals, plantation, energy, utility. So you've got a cross-section of industries we can get some insights into. So Anand, welcome. How enthused are you by the government leaving more money in the pockets of the taxpayer, and what kind of impact and what time frame do you anticipate that this impact will be felt by companies such as yours in deciding whether they wish to increase their investment outlooks for their different sectors?
Right. I think it's something that we as an industry wanted the government to put in some money, and I think the government has answered in a big way to make that happen. In my view, this will spur private investment coming in, and I would say possibly about a quarter wait, because I think people will start absorbing the benefits and slowly start investing. So I would say maybe about a quarter away by the time consumption happens. And then for investment, of course, your capacity utilization has to go up. There'll be many other factors such as the geopolitical risk that's we're likely to face. But over time, all these benefits will start paying off.
Okay, and are you disappointed with the government's growth targets for next year? Would you have liked the finance minister to be more ambitious? They set a range of 6.3 to 6.8%, which is roughly the same as where we could end up this year, give or take. Would you have wanted them to be more bold and ambitious there?
No, certainly, I think it would have been great if we could grow at a faster pace, but I think possibly it's a fair estimate that we are a complex country. There's still a lot to be done. And I think the bigger thing is the global uncertainty that we face, broken supply chains. What the US is going to do is very unclear. And for these initiatives to take effect, I would still say these are plans and ideas which will get implemented over the next, say, 6 months, 1 year, and over time. But I think the initiatives taken are great. I think some of the things that I really liked in the budget was the fact there was continuous messaging of simplification, deregulation, making lives easier for business with trust. So as these things play out, I think it is really the areas that we were looking at in terms of making life easier for manufacturing and for business going forward.
Shankar Iyer has a question. Shankar.
Hello, Anant. How are you? You expanded the footprint of your business. I'm sure your grandfather would have been very thrilled. Your acquisition of Camso, how does this play into, because it's an American footprint, you got the Indian footprint, how does this play into the Trump tariff story? Are you sort of inoculated, or do you have some concerns? How does this work out for you? The whole uncertainty over the supply chain issue, because you will be also looking at other markets.
Right. So Camso is a complex business. We acquired it from the French, manufacturing in Sri Lanka, markets in EU and US, and at one time headquartered in Canada. So it's really all over the place. But we are very, very positive. I don't think Sri Lanka as a manufacturing place is yet in Trump's radar. He will, in my view, go into EU, Mexico, Canada, China as possibly his first areas of tariff imposition. And why we acquired it was because we saw a lot of synergies between CEAT and Camso. We found that there are a lot of tires that can be made in the Camso brand by CEAT and vice versa. So the synergistic advantages are very high. It's a very premium brand. And we feel that acquiring a brand and getting market access today is extremely, extremely valuable. We found that manufacturing capacity of Camso today is at about 50% utilization. So no capex needed for some time. And if we are able to get the synergies that we want in the construction and the agricultural space, we'll be in good space.
Ms. Kidwai, do you see a disconnect between government's economic managers saying that the slowdown witnessed in the second quarter in growth numbers in this fiscal is just temporary and that growth will bounce back in double quick time? And then yet for next year, they set a growth target which is just about the same as the tempered growth that they're expecting this year. You know, I see a fundamental contradiction there. I mean, if you're thinking that it'll bounce back, then shouldn't they be taking a more ambitious growth target for next year?
So the range is wide, 6.3 to 6.8, and one can hope that we would push to 6.8. I think one of the reasons was just that the capex expenditure, which the public sector expenditure set at 11.1 lakh crore is going to wind up at more like the 10.1 sort of levels, which they have declared. And the number which we were somewhat disappointed, I was at FICCI earlier this morning, was 11.2 for next year on the capex front. But I just heard the Revenue Secretary explain that in fact, the number is more like 15.6, because what we should be looking at is the capex that has been dedicated for the state level expenditure. And that would therefore mean a 17% increase from the number that was set out for last year.
Do you buy the government's argument that because there was an election, therefore, the spends in public infrastructure didn't happen, everybody was in a wait and watch mode? Because on the contrary, there are people who say, the state governments simply don't have the capacity to go out and consume the spends that are being made available to them, and therefore don't blame just the election cycle. There's a larger structural problem in terms of capacity to get things done.
Yeah, and both are linked in a way, because what happens in an election cycle is everybody takes their eye off the ball on spending, the administration's busy managing elections, and budgets do get frozen. On the absorptive capacity, yes, there are also issues. I see that in the water and sanitation areas that I work in, where the ability for the Gram Panchayat and the state to actually utilize budgets which the center thrusts down to them in these critical sectors is an issue. And we have seen, therefore, the public-private partnerships that we, through the Drinking Water and Sanitation Ministry, have set up with the private sector working very well, where the private sector does not put the money in, but is in fact helping government spend that money in a material way in the rural areas. Urban is still an issue. And I think to the extent that the CapEx is going towards these very important programs of rail, road, sanitation, water, and big increases in budget, which I think will continue, have been mentioned as for Jal Shakti. There's an increase of 198%, in the Swachh Bharat 145% for the next year, are all indications of good programs which will continue to see investment where, in fact, we do need these because they contribute to the health of the nation and contribute to better hygiene and will therefore help the workforce as well.
Naina Lal Kidwai, Anand Goenka for joining us on this special budget broadcast. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your insights. I'm joined on this part of the broadcast by two people who have the same surname but come from very different sectors. I want to introduce first Nilesh Shah, Managing Director of Kotak Mahindra Asset Management Company. I have Jasmine Shah, National Spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party. So we don't mix it up. We'll go one by one and I'll go to Nilesh Shah first. Nilesh, the markets were rather muted in their response to the announcements from Finance Minister Sitharaman. We've seen a correction over the past few weeks, the BSE coming down from 85,000 odd to about 77,000 odd right now. On the basis of what you've heard in this budget and from everything else that you're seeing in the financial ecosystem, what's your outlook on a 6-month basis in terms of how much time it may take for the markets to reverse these corrections and come back to their highs and then beyond?
So right now, markets are driven by a lot of selling from FPI. And while they are not selling like they were selling during COVID time without price limit, but their selling is visible. Even today, they were a net seller. Now, when the side of the seller is known, obviously buyer will be cautious. Second, our valuations were reasonably high over our emerging market peer group. On a 5-year basis, Indian markets have delivered similar return like US. So there is a fair amount of profit on the table. As long as FPIs are sellers, I don't think so market is going to give them easy exit and there will be correction. But this budget has laid the foundation for growth to recover. And if monetary policy supports, then we'll have both fiscal and monetary support to the growth. Our GDP growth as well as corporate earnings could be better than the peer group, and eventually FPI investors will also return.
But are you seeing any signs on the horizon of foreign portfolio investors coming back soon? Because the last couple of months have seen the rate of increase of SIPs actually come down. So basically, so far we were seeing a trend where domestic investors month after month had got used to the advice given by the likes of Nilesh Shah that, save, invest, prosper, this is the best way to go. And they were seeing, significant financial returns and therefore were happy with it. Now with the markets correcting, and with foreign portfolio investors showing net outflows, they would be concerned about whether that holds in the future. So that may deter people from coming in, and therefore this consistent supply of domestic funds that we've seen from small investors, retail investors coming into the Indian markets with mutual funds propping up and giving support to the markets, that theory may not just hold in the way that it's held for the last couple of years.
So one, we don't foresee FPIs turning buyers in a hurry as they are exiting emerging market as an asset class. And US has done exceptionally well, whereas emerging market bogged down by China has not done as well. If emerging market as an asset class is seeing exit, I don't foresee how foreigners will be willing to invest in emerging markets, including India. Number two, US interest rates are right now at a fairly higher level of 4.5%. with that kind of risk-free rate, the expected return from Indian markets or emerging markets will be much higher. So we will see foreigners selling slowing down a little, but I don't see them turning positive soon. To domestic investors, we have always said maintain your asset allocation. As of today, despite our strong outperformance in last 5 years, people have put more money in currency notes than equity market. So I'm only requesting investors like Rahul bhai, please don't keep cash at home. If you invest through SIP in mutual funds and maintain your asset allocation, you will still make more return.
I have no cash at home. I'm all in. So therefore, the markets correcting in the way that they have is quite problematic, and we'd like that to reverse. Now, one of the reasons why foreign portfolio investors were more bullish on American markets was also the performance, the outsized performance of the Magnificent Seven, the tech stocks, the deep tech stocks, which had seen a massive run-up in pricing. Now that we've seen DeepSeek come out with very innovative and low-cost models of being able to put out the same computational power through their algorithms, do you see that change the outlook of these foreign investors on American tech? Because that's really key to what's been driving the American markets and generating these outsized returns for investors in the American stock markets.
So undoubtedly, there is some pressure on Magnificent Seven because of rapid advancement of technology by China. But we have started seeing some amount of flows going to equal weighted ETFs, where Magnificent Seven has been reduced significantly in terms of their weightage. We have also started seeing broad-based recovery, broad-based rally in 493 other stocks of S&P 500. With the tariffs and the potential tax cuts being offered by Trump administration, I think there will be case for investors to bet on 493 other stocks in US. And if Fed indeed provides liquidity or cut rates, then that rally can sustain for long. So right now, if not Magnificent Seven, 493 other stocks will carry the US market ahead.
So the next Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI meets on the 5th of February. You spoke about what the government has done on the fiscal side. What are you most realistically expecting on the monetary side, and how might this impact growth? There's a new RBI governor at the helm, a lot of pressure on him to reduce policy rates by about 25 basis points. Do you see that happen, given the position that had been taken by Shaktikanta Das, which was to push back against the pressure for cutting interest rates?
So RBI will be data-driven, and as of today, we need liquidity more than the rate cut. Through open market operation, buy-sell swaps and VRR, RBI has pumped in about 150,000 crore liquidity from here over next 30 days. With this budget where fiscal prudence is established, and not only this year, but next year's fiscal deficit has come below expectation. And more importantly, debt to GDP ratio will be in declining trajectory for next 6 years. That should give some room to the RBI to cut rates. Our inflation is reasonably under the RBI's target range. And hence, we will recommend first liquidity enhancement, which they have partially done, and second rate cut so that our growth can be supported.
No, but from Moody's we've heard, they're saying that India is likely to perform lesser than investment grade peers. The expectation was that if we continue on this fiscal glide path, keep fiscal deficit under control, that there might be a re-rating of India to investment grade. Moody's, at least in their initial assessment of this budget, seems to be suggesting that that's not how they read it.
Well, their name is Moody's, and hence their findings are also Moody. And their competitor says that our standards are poor. For example, what are they rating? Are they rating India's rupee rating? Then by definition, it should be AAA because we have unlimited power to print currency. The second is no, they are rating our foreign currency debt. Now, we are one of the few countries in the world whose net foreign exchange reserve is more than the net foreign exchange debt. How can you rate a company below investment grade or near investment grade if my cash position is more than the debt? So their names, Moody's and poor standards, suggest that we should not take them seriously.
I wish it was as simple as that, then that would make life easier. But I have one final very quick question before I let you go. We saw the consumer-facing chips in the green all through the day during the budget speech and soon after. how much of a lag are you expecting between this announcement, between consumer demand actually increasing, and the lag between Indian companies then deciding to increase their investment appetites?
So this 1 lakh crore tax rebate given to taxpayer is just a catalyst for multiplier effect. It should be supported first by higher liquidity and credit creation. Then it should be supported by lower rates. And finally, it should be supported by ease of doing business on the ground so that we can have a virtuous cycle of demand creating higher capacity utilization leading to higher investment and eventually creating more jobs. The consumer stocks were kind of neglected sector in the market. Infrastructure and capital goods and real estate had done exceptionally well. There is limited supply in consumer names because there is hardly any issuance. Put together, under ownership and limited supply along with this catalyst has pushed consumer stocks up. For them to sustain at the current valuation, it requires not only the current 1 lakh crore tax rebate, but also the multiplier effect of that flowing through.
Well, you always speak candidly and have sharp original insights, which is why I was keen that you join us. Thank you very much, Nilesh Bhai, for joining us on this broadcast. It's not just Moody's that is moody, Jasmine Shah, even the voters of Delhi are very moody. And the key expectation the finance minister and the BJP have is that now that they've given this change in tax structures, left more money with the middle class taxpayer, that this will yield bumper dividend, have the highest return on investment on the 5th of February. How alarmed are you?
Rahul, first let me tell you that I'm happy that because Mr. Arvind Kejriwal put so much of pressure that the middle class of India is expecting so much from the BJP government, and the first demand amongst the 7 demands that he made almost 2 weeks back was to raise the income tax exemption limit. That finally today BJP has woken up.
So this is
after
impact
so many
Kejriwal.
years and has said, no, absolutely. You remember when Mr. Kejriwal came and made those 7 demands, for 2 days, all the national media was discussing it कि middle class की कौन पहली बार कोई बात कर रहा है. So we are very happy that एक चीज उन्होंने सुन ली. But now I'll disagree with you. This is an extremely disappointing budget for every citizen of Delhi, including the middle class, because the middle class has not benefited. A small fraction of the middle class has benefited. Rahul, there are many, I would say, numbers that show that around 30% of the population is middle class. Now, how many are going to get benefit of the income tax exemption? There are only around 3 crore income tax payers in India, which is around 2% of the population. So, matlab, only, I would say, maybe 5 to 10% of the middle class is going to benefit from this. What happens to the remaining 90%
that
doesn't pay?
Jasmine, it's not as simple as that, because there is signaling, there is intent, and there is semantics and mood. Mahal. Elections are about mahal. Now the BJP can build this mahal. Humne middle class ko rahat di. We've left money in your pocket. Balle balle. That's the messaging.
Rahul, जब पॉकेट में हर दिन आपके ऊपर महंगाई की इतनी मार पड़ी हुई, just think about what the remaining middle class and the remaining population of Delhi is going through, and I would say the rest of India. You look at the inflation. One of our 7 demands was to reduce GST on essential items because everybody pays indirect taxes. Aapne dekho, for the first time in Indian history, GST has been put on essential food items, 18% on things like health insurance. Look at the excise tax on petrol, diesel. We had demanded reduce those. But more importantly, it's also important to ask, what are you doing with the remaining? You have a 50 lakh crore budget. Aapne middle class ke liye kya kiya? We have demanded that the health and education budget be increased to 10% so that quality schools and quality healthcare can be given even to the middle classes, like we have done in Delhi. What did the BJP do? Nothing. Today, the health budget, which was announced in today's budget, is only 1.9%. We had asked for 10%. The education budget is only 2.5%. It used to be 5% when Prime Minister Modi ji came to power. So you have literally to a dying middle class, to a hurting middle class, which was hurting for the last 10 years. You come eventually and give a small lollipop and say कि आप खुश रहो अब और सवाल मत पूछो. I think the people of this country and the people of Delhi
You're
are
calling this a lollipop.
Smart.
Let me get an independent take on this. Shankar Iyer, whether it's a lollipop or a Swiss chocolate, we don't know just yet. It's everybody's view. Ultimately, some may think of it as a very fine dark cacao sweet Swiss chocolate. Some may think it's a lollipop. Hai. How is this likely to play out on the 5th? The BJP over the next 48 hours will go all guns blazing.
So, first approach of the Aam Aadmi Party is to claim credit that we did the middle class budget, so we are going to get this thing. The BJP, of course, will hammer it down the throats of everyone, the 37, 38, 40% vote that they have already, and plus maybe add. The outcome of the election will be decided by the bottom of the pyramid in Delhi, basically.
The non-taxpayer.
Not the taxpayer. So, how does BJP sell the budget to the bottom of the pyramid is the question now. So, there are two elements in this which are interesting. One is the Udyam credit card, the micro enterprises ke liye jo credit card. The other is the various schemes that have been announced for various health and education and other initiatives. Eventually, I think it will be the women voter whether she's choosing the 2100 or the 2500, which will make the difference in the Delhi election. Knowing Delhi, it's like, they always hedge their bets. So you never know about...
No, but I asked the Home Minister this question, Jasmine Shah, about the AAP model of freebies versus BJP also coming up with so many reveries. And he says that we do it with balance. We do it in moderation and calibration, whereas the AAP goes overboard. They have no sense of calibration in terms of what limit should these freebies be restricted to. He says we keep it to less than 8% of any state budget. And therefore, we're being responsible. He's accusing you, and that's the message that they're taking to voters, of the AAP being irresponsible. Jasmine Shah.
This is very interesting logic that BJP gives, that for the people, spend only 8% of the budget. The remaining budget should go for the rich classes. And that is the difference between AAP and BJP's approach to governance. BJP in the last 5 years has written off 10 lakh crores of loans to the rich. Tab unko yaad nahi aayi middle class ki. Aaj jab, they are saying that the shortfall because of this tax rebate is going to be 1 lakh crore. तो आपने 1 लाख करोड़ केवल माफ किया है मिडिल क्लास के लिए, and you think this is like the biggest thing on earth that you have done for them. What about jobs? What about people who do not have income? What happened to the 2 crores per year jobs ka wada? 90% of Indian population earns less than 25,000 rupees per month. What happens to them? उनको तो इन्फ्लेशन झेलना पड़ रहा है, उनको हाई जीएसटी झेलना पड़ रहा है, पेट्रोल एंड डीजल पे 3 गुना जो एक्साइज लगा दिया वो झेलना पड़ रहा है. So that is there is no vision for growth. And India, which does not spend on health and education, will never become a Viksit Bharat. आप भले जितना Viksit Bharat, there must be a dozen times that Nirmala Sitharaman ji today spoke about Viksit Bharat. लेकिन government schools का एक बार नाम नहीं लिया उन्होंने पूरी budget speech में. This is the shallowness of the vision of BJP. कि आप अमीर लोगों के ऊपर खर्च करो तो विकसित भारत बन जाएगा. आम आदमी पार्टी believes in investing in health and education first, giving good quality services to everyone, including the middle classes. Today, middle classes are coming in our mohalla clinics. But tell me, in Gujarat and all the BJP ruled states, do middle class go to health and education facilities of the government? They have checked out. They have no other option because you don't spend money of them.
Well, we'll have a lot of opportunity over the next 48 hours to discuss politics, and then, of course, the polling on the 5th and the big counting day. There's an exciting election going on. There's an exciting budget. A lot to talk about in terms of what was actually done. Jasmine Shah, for joining us with your thoughts. You heard from two Shahs, one from the markets, one from the world of politics. Thank you for joining us. Shankar, you've been an absolute delight. Lots of sharp, original insights as always. So thank you for coming down and joining us as part of this broadcast.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.